charged with 1 count of assault, 1 count of sexual assault, and 1 count of unlawful confinement against an adult female between September 2024 and March 2025. At their home in Lansdowne, Nova Scotia early that morning, the children's mother, stepfather, and his mom all say they heard the kids playing as they dipped in and out of sleep. When they awoke to silence, they all ran outside, and at 10 o'clock, their mother called 911.
The 6-year-old is the girl, I believe, and she's wearing pink. The 4-year-old is wearing some blue dinosaur boots. So, yeah, I think that's all we kind of have right now.
For 9 months, the world watched a tearful stepfather coordinate search efforts and stand as a shield for his family following the mysterious disappearance of 2 young children. He played the perfect hero in front of the media. But the truth is often darker than what meets the eye. In January 2026, that mask shattered when the police arrived with an arrest warrant. The horrifying twist: his freedom was taken not because of the missing children. Under the light of newly unsealed court documents, the narrative of wandering children suddenly mutated into a chilling tale of manipulation and psychological control. For months on end, the public was drawn into a highly mysterious and elaborate narrative where the line between truth and lies was entirely blurred. One of the pivotal moments that exposed Daniel Martell's complete manipulation was his interview segment. Standing before the media with a highly confident and calm demeanor, Daniel boldly stated,
"Discovered tattered and intertwined in a tree, this pink blanket is one of the only pieces of physical evidence in the mysterious disappearance of Jack and Lilly Sullivan. And now it's the subject of a second round of police polygraph examinations."
It was in an odd spot, an odd position. It was just drooped over a branch on a thin tree. It was nothing that... It definitely wasn't stuck in there, it was just there.
At the time, this statement was seen as proof of the absolute cooperation of a desperate stepfather searching for his children. However, behind that perfect facade lay a truth that would make anyone shudder. The most shocking piece of information that completely shattered Daniel's image was the origin of the pink blanket. In the early days of the search, this blanket was considered the only physical clue, a fragile ray of hope amidst the vast Lansdowne forest. Notably, the person who discovered and eagerly reported this clue to the police was Daniel himself. But the truth always finds a way to reveal itself. During the investigation, authorities uncovered a detail that turned everything upside down. The rest of that very pink blanket was sitting right inside the trash bin at his own house. This was no coincidence. It was a cold-blooded and highly calculated staging of a scene. He personally tore a piece of the blanket, took it outside to create a false trail to mislead the entire rescue team in K9 units, and then calmly threw the remainder into his trash bin before going on national television to play the innocent victim. Daniel's downfall did not stop there. The true legal turning point that sealed his fate occurred in January 2026. The RCMP arrested Daniel, but surprisingly, this arrest did not stem directly from the disappearance of Lilly and Jack. Instead, he was charged with the forcible confinement of an adult. This incident allegedly took place in December 2024, 6 months before the 2 children completely vanished. Being stripped of his freedom for a past offense opened a new lens into the psychological profile of this manipulator. From a criminal psychology perspective, a man capable of planning, depriving an adult of their freedom and confining them someone with the physical ability to defend themselves and speak out undoubtedly harbors a highly tyrannical desire for control. If an adult could not escape his grasp, the agonizing question arises: what truly happened to the completely dependent and defenseless children once the doors were closed? To understand his motives deeper, we must look at how he used the blanket as a prop in his own play. Individuals with narcissistic traits often believe they are smarter than everyone else, including law enforcement. By providing the clue himself, he created a safe cover, controlling the pace of the search while reinforcing his image as a dedicated hero. However, this exact complacency left a fatal flaw. The police finding the rest of the blanket in the trash turned his claim of having nothing to hide into a clear confirmation of a deliberate misdirection. The forcible confinement charge from December 2024 extinguished any argument that the children's disappearance was a spontaneous accident. It exposed a calculated, repetitive, and escalating pattern of behavior. The entire event was not a story of children wandering off, but the result of a prolonged manipulation process where every exit was sealed by the very person entrusted to protect them. Daniel Martell standing before the media.
At this point, so I think everyone's just looking to, what's the alternate, what could have happened to the kids other than being in the woods.
Right from the very first moments when Lilly and Jack were declared missing, Daniel Martell exhibited a behavioral pattern completely different from the usual psychology of a family member facing a crisis. Instead of stepping back to allow authorities to lead or sharing the focus with biological relatives, he actively stepped into the bright spotlight of the media. He turned himself into the central character, playing the role of a highly responsible hero, a stepfather ready to throw himself into coordinating the search teams. By continuously appearing on news broadcasts and providing information on his own terms, he manipulated the public's perspective, constructing a flawless, pristine image of himself. The pinnacle of this complacency was his constant boasting about easily passing a polygraph test, using that result as a solid shield to block all suspicion. From a psychological analysis standpoint, this is a classic manifestation of a profound narcissist, craving public acclaim and using a tragedy as a stage to feed his need for attention. When closely examining his statement during the vigil in October 2025, we can identify a highly sophisticated psychological manipulation tactic. His declaration that all areas had been searched and his suggestion for the public to consider other possibilities was not merely an objective observation. In reality, it was a calculated move aimed at redirecting the search teams and public attention far away from the Lansdowne woods. Why was he so desperate for everyone to stop searching that area? The most logical deduction based on the chain of events is that he knew perfectly well the two children were never present in the location he had intentionally pointed to from the start. This diversion allowed him to maintain control over the direction of the entire investigation. When piecing together all of Daniel's statements and actions, a cold truth gradually emerges. He never truly put any genuine effort into finding Lilly and Jack. The tears, the television appearances, and the urgent pleas were all meticulously arranged scenes in a script written entirely by him. He was not a desperate father looking for his children. He was a director striving to craft a narrative about how the children vanished, in order to conceal a hidden reality. That hero facade was merely a tool for him to maintain power and manipulation, turning a mysterious disappearance into a theatrical play, where everyone inadvertently became a guided audience. When asked about the allegations of physical force, Daniel immediately denied them.
Those allegations are false. And as I said, it was just to paint me in a bad light. That's basically why there's all of those allegations of abuse came out. I never physically abused Malaya.
In the realm of behavioral psychology, the darkest secrets are rarely buried forever deep in the woods. They are often carefully hidden right behind the closed doors of a seemingly peaceful home. The truth about the Sullivan family's life was only truly brought to light when official court documents were unsealed, delivering a massive revelation to the public. In stark contrast to the image of a tranquil household that Daniel Martell worked so hard to build in front of the media, these legal documents paint a suffocating and threatening reality. According to the official statements from the mother, Malaya recorded in the RCMP files, her life was a continuous cycle of extreme suppression. She detailed how Daniel would frequently block her path, use physical strength to hold her down, and strip away her only means of communication, her cell phone, whenever she tried to call her biological mother for help. Preventing her from connecting with her family was not merely a spontaneous act in a moment of anger, but a meticulously calculated tactic. From a psychological analysis perspective, this is the classic model of coercive control. This method begins by shrinking the victim's world, cutting off all outside support, and leaving the victim completely isolated and dependent on the manipulator. When a mother is stripped of her voice and ability to resist, the entire family falls into a vortex of absolute domination. Daniel's reaction when confronted with this evidence further exposed his narcissistic nature. During an interview with Global News in January 2026, right after these files were made public, he did not show the slightest worry or concern about how to find Lilly and Jack. Instead, he immediately braced himself to play the pitiful victim of public opinion. He coldly denied all claims, asserting that the legal documents were merely a tool to smear his personal image. He poured all his energy into protecting his ego and the perfect facade he had painstakingly fabricated, rather than focusing on the safety of the two missing children. This cold denial is not just a typical defensive reflex. It is a clear testament that he views himself as the center of every tragedy. He refused to face the reality that his isolation and domineering personality had turned the house into a dark cage. And when a man is willing to use force to silence his partner and seal off all her exits, we are forced to chillingly ask, what did the fragile, defenseless children have to endure during that period of confinement? The truth behind that door is not just about suffocating hidden corners, but a chilling manipulation that paved the way for an irreversible tragedy. Before we delve into the dark corners of that fateful night, if you appreciate facts being uncovered objectively and scientifically through the lens of case files, please take a second to subscribe to the Crime Evidence channel and turn on notifications. Your companionship is our greatest motivation to continue unveiling hidden truths. Moving into part 4 of the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case file, we are forced to confront the core element of any criminal investigation: the consistency of statements and the authenticity of the timeline. In any case involving the safety of young children, the first few hours are always the golden window that determines everything. However, at the house in Lansdowne Station on the night before May 2nd, 2025, the timeline not only showed gaps, but was torn apart by completely contradictory statements. Listen to this excerpt broadcast to clearly see this fracture.
According to court documents, neighbor Brad Wong told police he heard a loud vehicle coming and going 3 or 4 times after midnight and into the early hours of the morning.
When RCMP investigators reconstructed the official timeline from the evening of May 1, they discovered a dangerous discrepancy in the accounts of the adults living under the same roof. The mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, clearly stated that she went to bed around 9 p.m. At that time, Daniel Martell was still awake, and she had no idea what he did or where he went after she fell asleep. Conversely, when facing the authorities, Daniel painted a completely different scenario. He firmly asserted that he went to sleep quite early and slept straight through until late the next morning. He emphasized that he never left the property and that no vehicles moved that night. However, this veil of lies was immediately torn down by objective witnesses from the outside world. Neighbor Brad Wong, who lived at an elevated position with a clear view down Hurolic Road, provided highly valuable testimony, indicating that Daniel's vehicle continuously moved 3 to 4 times after midnight. From his window, he even saw the headlights sweeping across the treetops as the vehicle drove far into the darkness and then returned. This account was corroborated by another neighbor, Justin Smith, who heard a vehicle turn around near the railroad tracks around 1:30 a.m., making loud noises before speeding off toward the woods. By cross-referencing the vehicles, witnesses confirmed that the car operating unusually that night belonged to the stepfather, Daniel Martell. From a behavioral and psychological analysis perspective, this inconsistency carries an extremely serious implication. When a major incident occurs, human memory can be affected, distorted, or skewed by panic or extreme stress. People might confuse a few minutes in their schedule, but intentional, repetitive physical actions like waking up in the middle of the night, starting a loud engine, and driving back and forth deep into the woods multiple times are not something that can be easily forgotten or mistaken. These are physical actions that leave undeniable traces. Daniel Martell's insistence that he slept early and soundly cannot be explained by a stress-induced memory lapse. It can only be a deliberate effort to conceal his true movements. He understood that admitting to driving into the woods at dawn would cause his perfect mask to instantly crumble. The deception in the timeline is the strongest incriminating evidence that there was no wandering off on that fateful night.
Right, was this some of the stuff that you guys had been washing when you got it, or?
We didn't get to this stuff because it just became too overwhelming.
Okay.
But this was some of Jack and Lily's belongings from Lansdowne.
Blankets, once cherished by 6-year-old Lilly and 5-year-old Jack Sullivan, now reminders.
It was one of her favorite blankets.
Okay, yeah, it's got the cherries on it.
Every blanket she had was her favorite, especially if it was pink.
Cheryl Robinson and Angeline Maloney Arsenault are both close with the children's mother. They've spent the last 9 months doing their best to offer support since Jack and Lilly disappeared, a mystery that remains unsolved despite months of searches.
In the dark tapestry of the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case, the profound sorrow stems not only from the mysterious vanishing of the children, but also from the gnawing of belated regrets and the cruel isolation that preceded the event.
Happy kids. Very happy kids. Always excited. They love their mom. They love their grandmother. And they loved each other. They fought, but they loved each other.
What was Lilly like?
Very girly. She got excited easily, loved her dolls. She was just very outgoing and cutest little thing. Jack loves his dinosaurs, loved to play with his toys. Jack was more quieter, he was on the quieter side.
The exact moment that completely shattered the children wandering into the woods theory was captured through the tears and agonizing words of the grandmother, Belinda Gray, during her broadcast interview. When I found out Malaya left, I knew there was no sense searching anymore. I don't think these babies wandered off. The statement was not merely an emotional reaction. It was the visceral intuition of a grandmother who had recognized the severe abnormalities brewing inside the Lansdowne Station residence. The detailed contents of the files reveal a heartbreaking reality. Belinda Gray had been entirely cut off from all communication and had not been allowed to see her biological grandchildren for 2 full years before the tragedy struck. This agonizing separation was no accident. It was the direct result of Daniel Martell's highly calculated and tyrannical isolation tactics. By controlling behaviors, manipulating Malaya's daily life, and intercepting any calls to her mother, Daniel successfully constructed an impenetrable wall separating the maternal family from the fragile children. When the children were completely severed from their familial safety net, they became more vulnerable than ever behind those closed doors. The grandmother's gut feeling that the kids did not simply wander off was further solidified by the late, yet bitterly revealing, awakening of the mother herself.
We could at least rule some things out because the speculation in the public it's constant. And it would be nice if they could be more clear on what they feel didn't happen.
The fact that Malaya decided to pack her belongings and move out of the mobile home immediately following the disappearance of her 2 children is an action with profound psychological implications. It demonstrates that, after months of physical suppression and intense coercion, the mother gradually realized the extreme danger posed by her partner. When the cell phone was no longer snatched from her hands and the truth about the blanket in the trash bin began to surface, she finally understood that the Lansdowne forest was not where the answers were hidden. The mother's departure serves as an unspoken confirmation that the true peril resided right within their own household. Beyond the heavy psychological burden of the family tragedy, those left behind also had to face another merciless weapon: the ruthless pressure from online public opinion. The biological family of Lilly and Jack was pushed into a state of total exhaustion, besieged by endless conspiracy theories and baseless accusations from internet sleuths. The children's maternal aunt painfully described their lives as a terrible nightmare, as they not only had to endure the agonizing loss of their niece and nephew, but also had to weather malicious attacks from the public. The cautious silence maintained by law enforcement inadvertently created a toxic information void, a space where relentless rumors constantly pushed the victims' loved ones into an abyss of despair. Ultimately, the wandering off theory completely collapsed, making way for a harsh reality defined by toxic control and the sky-piercing grief of those left waiting. When dissecting the timeline of a mysterious disappearance, investigators often look for the silence, the unaccounted moments where actions are taken but not recorded. In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the most terrifying element is not just what happened, but the chilling silence that followed. The official records establish a timeline that raises immediate red flags. There is a staggering 4-hour window from the moment the alarm reportedly rang at 6:15 a.m. to the time the 911 call was finally placed at 10:01 a.m. In the realm of criminal investigations, 4 hours is not merely a delay, it is an absolute eternity. To put this into perspective, when a caretaker realizes a child is gone, panic is instantaneous. The natural instinct is to alert the authorities within minutes, not hours. A 4-hour gap suggests something entirely different from frantic searching. That extensive window of time provides more than enough opportunity to completely alter a location. In 4 hours, an individual can easily sanitize a scene, dispose of physical traces, and meticulously coordinate a fabricated story. This deliberate delay allowed the narrative to be fully constructed before the police ever set foot on the property. It gave the manipulator the upper hand, setting the stage for the authorities rather than presenting them with an untouched, chaotic reality. The time was not spent looking for the lost, it was spent burying the truth. Equally as disturbing as the missing time is a specific physical detail that Daniel Martell willingly introduced into his narrative: the wrench. During his initial statements, Daniel claimed that he used a heavy wrench to securely fasten the door of their residence. His justification for this unusual method was that they were trying to keep bears out of the home. On the surface, in a rural woodland setting, it might sound like a plausible, albeit excessive, safety measure. However, when this detail is re-examined through the newly unsealed court documents and his subsequent legal charges, its true purpose becomes chillingly clear. Daniel was later arrested and formally charged with the forcible confinement of an adult. When viewed through the lens of this specific charge, the story of the wrench takes on a completely sinister meaning. A heavy tool utilized to jam or secure a door from the outside, or in a manner that makes it impossible to open from the inside, is not a defensive measure against wildlife. It is an offensive tool of captivity. It is not designed to prevent the outside world from coming in. It is explicitly designed to keep the people inside from getting out. This physical mechanism of control perfectly aligns with the psychological domination observed in the household. The wrench ceases to be a random household object and transforms into an instrument of extreme coercion. By locking the door in a way that trapped the occupants, he effectively turned the mobile home into a secluded cage. Combining this mechanical lock with the 4-hour delay in calling for help paints a horrifying picture. It suggests an environment where every exit was intentionally blocked, and every minute was carefully managed to ensure the reality of that morning remained permanently hidden behind that very locked door. Before we dive into the physical anomalies of the Lansdowne crime scene, if you value this kind of objective, detailed analysis, please take a moment to subscribe to the Crime Noir channel and turn on notifications. Your continued support ensures that these case files remain in the public eye and helps us maintain the momentum needed to uncover the truth. When analyzing a suspicious disappearance, investigators look for the intersection where verbal statements meet physical reality. In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the narrative presented by Daniel Martell completely shatters when confronted with the unyielding laws of physics and forensic evidence. His story demanded belief in physical miracles, but the scene itself exposed a chillingly calculated fabrication. The first glaring inconsistency lies with the ATV. According to his initial claims, the moment Daniel realized the children were missing, he leaped onto his ATV and drove frantically into the muddy, treacherous woods to search for them. However, when law enforcement assessed the property, the visual evidence told a drastically different story. The ATV parked at the residence was entirely spotless. There was not a single speck of dirt, mud, or woodland debris on its tires or undercarriage. In a rural environment like Lansdowne, conducting an off-road search inevitably leaves heavy physical traces on a vehicle. An immaculately clean ATV directly contradicts the claim of a frantic deep woods rescue effort. This leads to a terrifying deduction. The vehicle was either never used to search for the children, or it was meticulously cleaned after being utilized for a much darker concealed purpose. This is exactly why keeping the pressure on the details surrounding this ATV remains crucial to the investigation. Furthermore, the staging of the scene becomes undeniably apparent when examining the ground itself. When a child wanders off, they do not simply vanish into thin air. They leave a continuous trail of footprints, disturbed earth, and broken foliage. Yet the Lansdowne scene presented an impossible physical anomaly. A solitary footprint. Finding a single, deep shoe print isolated in the thick mud defies human locomotion. A child cannot take one step and then levitate. From a behavioral profiling standpoint, this isolated mark is not a trace of movement. It strongly indicates that someone took a piece of the children's footwear, walked to a specific location, and manually pressed it into the ground. It was a strategically placed prop designed to mislead rescue teams and point them toward the vast, empty forest. This staging theory is ultimately solidified by the reaction of the highly trained canine units. Search dogs are incredibly adept at picking up continuous scent trails left by wandering individuals. Yet when deployed around the property, the K9S were completely baffled. They could not establish a path leading away from the house. The dogs lost the scent almost immediately because there was simply no trail to follow. The most logical and devastating conclusion is that Lilly and Jack never stepped foot outside that property on their own. The physical evidence, from the spotless ATV to the fabricated footprint, and the confused K9S points to a meticulously constructed illusion meant to conceal a reality that never left the confines of their home. In complex investigations, silence from law enforcement is rarely a sign of inaction. More often, it is a highly calculated strategy. For months, the public and the media heavily criticized the RCMP for keeping the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan categorized strictly under the Missing Persons Act, From the outside, it seemed as though the police were failing to recognize the clear red flags surrounding Daniel Martell. However, looking closely at the official legal framework, this classification was an intentional and crucial move. Law enforcement operates on the strict threshold of evidence, not merely on the grounds of suspicion or public intuition. Upgrading the case to a criminal investigation without concrete physical proof would have been a premature move, potentially tipping off the suspect and allowing him to fortify his defenses. By maintaining the facade of a standard missing persons search, the investigators lulled Daniel into a false sense of security, encouraging him to keep talking to the media, making contradictory statements, and ultimately exposing his own lies. While the public was blinded by frustration, the investigators were quietly deploying a classic high-stakes psychological maneuver known as the squeeze. They knew that confronting a narcissistic manipulator directly about the missing children would only result in more fabricated stories and endless denials. Instead, they attacked his foundation from an entirely different angle. In January 2026, authorities executed an arrest warrant for Daniel based on charges from a past incident specifically, the forcible confinement of an adult occurring prior to the children's disappearance. This was the ultimate pressure tactic. Arresting him on past charges served multiple strategic purposes simultaneously. First, it immediately stripped him of his grieving father armor. He could no longer stand in front of the cameras playing the victim or the proactive hero. He was now a detained individual facing serious legal consequences. Second, it drastically shrank his world. By taking away his freedom, they cut off his access to the media, his ability to manipulate public perception, and his power to control the narrative. He was suddenly placed in a highly restricted environment where his manipulative tactics held no value. Most importantly, this arrest sent a powerful, undeniable signal of safety to the most crucial witness in the entire case, the mother, Malaya. For months, she had been trapped under his coercive control, silenced by fear and proximity. By removing Daniel from the environment and locking him away, the police effectively dismantled the invisible cage he had built around her. The squeeze was not just about holding Daniel accountable for a past crime. It was a meticulous operation designed to break his psychological hold over the family, hoping that in his absence, the suffocating silence would finally shatter, allowing the true story of that fateful May morning to emerge. The timeline of a criminal investigation is often a relentless waiting game, but when the moment of legal reckoning finally arrives, it ruthlessly strips away all pretenses and fabricated narratives. In March 2026, the heavy doors of the Pictou Provincial Court opened to reveal the spectacular and definitive collapse of Daniel Martell's carefully constructed facade. For nearly a year, the public had grown accustomed to a very specific, highly broadcasted version of this man. He was the self-proclaimed hero, the outspoken stepfather who eagerly sought out microphones and camera lenses to declare his innocence and dictate the direction of the search efforts. However, the individual who stood before the judge that Monday morning was entirely unrecognizable from the confident, media-savvy manipulator of the past. The physical transformation he exhibited was a direct and striking mirror of his total psychological defeat. Inside the densely packed courtroom, there were no theatrical tears, no rehearsed pleas, and no grand speeches about fighting for the missing children. Instead, Daniel appeared as a man completely cornered by the law. He stood rigidly with his hands tightly clasped at his waist, his head lowered, and his eyes staring blankly forward. He actively avoided making eye contact with the public and completely shunned the very reporters he had once utilized as his personal megaphone. Following the brief preliminary hearing, he hastily exited the building, maintaining a profound defensive silence and outright refusing to acknowledge any questions from the press. This sudden retreat was not a display of stoic dignity. It was the visceral, panicked reaction of a man who realized he had irrevocably lost control of the narrative. To truly understand this dramatic behavioral shift, one must examine the core psychology of a highly manipulative individual. People who exhibit profound narcissistic traits survive and thrive on what behavioral analysts refer to as an audience. They require constant attention, external validation, and a captive stage where they can act as the ultimate director of the play. For many months, the tragedy of the missing children provided Daniel with that exact stage. But a court of law operates on an entirely different frequency. It is an unyielding environment governed strictly by objective facts, verifiable evidence, and legal thresholds, completely immune to emotional manipulation or staged empathy. In front of a judge and the Crown prosecutor, Daniel was no longer the author of the story. He was merely a detained defendant stripped of his coercive power. When a master manipulator is suddenly deprived of his audience and his ability to spin reality, a deep psychological panic inevitably sets in. The deceptive tools he previously relied upon, charm, misdirection, and aggressive denial, are rendered completely useless in the face of formal charges and unsealed legal documents. This internal panic causes the facade to fracture, leading to erratic behavior and a complete breakdown of his defense mechanisms. The silence he maintained as he fled the courthouse was not a strategic, calculated move. It was the physical manifestation of an illusion crumbling under the crushing weight of reality. The mask of the proactive protector was gone forever, leaving behind nothing but a cornered individual, forced to finally confront the inescapable consequences of his own hidden actions. Before we reach the conclusion of this extensive investigation into the chilling disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, I want to thank you for walking this dark path with us. If you believe in the importance of keeping unsolved cases in the public eye and demanding answers for the voiceless, please take a moment to subscribe to the Crime Noir channel and ring the notification bell. Your continuous engagement is the most powerful tool we have to ensure that these missing children are never forgotten by the world. As we analyze the dramatic legal turning point that took place in early 2026, it is incredibly easy for the public to fall into a psychological trap, watching Daniel Martell stripped of his freedom, cornered in a provincial courtroom, and finally held accountable for his coercive control, provides a visceral, undeniable sense of justice. Seeing the master manipulator lose his stage brings a wave of collective satisfaction. However, we absolutely must not let this temporary relief obscure the primary objective of this entire journey. We must remember one cold, hard legal fact. Daniel has been detained for offenses committed against an adult. As of this moment, he has not faced a single formal charge directly connected to the vanishing of 6-year-old Lilly and 4-year-old Jack. The manipulator's mask has been permanently shattered, but the ultimate mystery we set out to solve remains agonizingly unresolved. The public must understand that this case file is still wide open. While media headlines may gradually fade, and internet detectives might move on to the next trending mystery, the meticulous, silent machinery of law enforcement continues to operate relentlessly in the background. The RCMP investigators are not resting. They are simply navigating the rigorous demands of the legal system. They continue to evaluate thousands of digital files, cross-reference testimonies, and patiently wait for the strategic pressure of the squeeze to finally break the silence of the remaining witnesses. This is the hardest reality of real-world investigations. True resolution requires immense patience, not just immediate attention. Therefore, our collective duty is to remain steadfast and vigilant. We cannot afford to think that a single courtroom appearance marks the end of the story. We must continue to share the faces of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. We must keep asking the difficult, evidence-based questions about the 4-hour gap, the pristine all-terrain vehicle, and the staged physical evidence. It is imperative that we maintain a steady, factual focus, avoiding the toxic spiral of baseless online rumors, and instead offering a supportive space for the truth to eventually surface. The narrative of the heroic stepfather was an illusion, but the absence of those 2 children is a haunting reality. Somewhere out there, beyond the deceptive scripts and the heavy shadows of the Lansdowne region, Lilly and Jack are still waiting. The night may seem endless, and the woods may be deep, but the pursuit of justice does not expire. We will not close this file, and we will not stop looking until the definitive truth is finally brought into the light.